Welcome to the PressBox. I'm Ryan Thorburn, joined by Steve Mims. We're getting ready for Oregon's road trip to Utah to take on the number 11 Utes. Steve, another eventful week for the Ducks. Obviously, we talked about their loss to Stanford on Saturday night. Since that time, they've lost Austin Malauota, a starting defensive tackle. He was arrested and dismissed from the team. A recent Oregon grad is accused Darren Carrington of shoving him to the ground and breaking his arm. No suspension there. Police are not done investigating that. And then you have, a former athletic director going on Portland radio and kind of discussing the whole coaching situation. So not a lot of focus on football right now, but certainly a lot of news for the Ducks.
Well, there's not a whole lot to focus on in football. You know the end of the season's 2 weeks away. This is a strange time for Oregon football where you're not thinking about magic numbers to clinch the division, what it's going to take to get in the top four of the college football playoff. It's who's going to get through the next 2 weeks and could 5 and 7 get into a bowl game, and what happens with the coaching staff after that. So, yeah, I asked Mark Helfrich today about the off-field issues. He wasn't real interested in going real deep into it. He said talks to him about it all the time. Made a reference to if something happens to one football player, it kind of paints the brush on the rest of the team. I pointed out it's now up to 4 football players. But yeah, he said that he tells them, hey, you're given a lot here to do this, so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. One of them staying out of trouble, certainly just not a good look off the field for the Ducks with now kind of 4 high-profile guys running afoul of the law.
So the Utes, they're in the mix for the South Division title and, potential Pac-12 championship. 2 years ago was a very good game, very painful game for the Ducks. Obviously, there was the Farrell Brown injury and several other injuries to both teams. Last year, Utah put it on Oregon, 62 points in a win at Autzen. That kind of started this slide, or at least that got people's attention of like, what's going on here? Utah is just every year, and especially this year, I'm sure, a really bad matchup for Oregon.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I think that is the one when people look at what's happened to Oregon football, you go back to that. I think starting with that Utah loss last year, Oregon's 10-10 overall, kind of a 500 team, and it wasn't just a lot. They just killed Oregon, beat them by 42 at Autzen Stadium, something we'd never seen before. They ran a punt to where Oregon covered the wrong guy, and they took. It was almost just insult to injury. And they look really good. They've got a loss in the last second that they couldn't score against Cal, and then they played Washington right to the end. So, they're a player or two from being undefeated and probably being in the top 4 right now.
I wrote a story earlier in the week about the offensive line. If you're looking for any sort of positive, they're a young group. They did rush for over 200 yards against Stanford. That's the only Pac-12 team that's done that. The running game getting closer, but this is a different animal with Hunter Dimmick and this Utah defensive line, pretty nasty. Big test for Justin Herbert, obviously another tough learning curve possibly here.
Yeah, and Matt Lubick said yesterday that Justin should welcome that. If they're going to blitz, that means you got one-on-one coverage, and you should be able to go back and find some guys. They've protected him pretty well. I think he's been sacked pretty much about 3 times a game. That's about what Utah gets, 3 or 4. So you'll expect that. The bigger theme to me might be Utah's averaging nearly 2 interceptions a game. We saw Justin throw a couple interceptions in the end zone. Those are kind of things in a game like this, if you're going to stay close. The 2 previous games he had no picks. So I think you need to see that he can kind of, if he's got to make some pretty quick decisions, get it to his guy, and if he can do that and get some guys open, they might be able to get some points on the board.
Defensively, not a lot of hope that things are going to change there. Oregon is kind of battling Cal for, the worst defense in the country. So I guess you could say, well, Cal beat Utah on a goal line stand. Well, Utah didn't have their running back that they have now has come out of retirement, and he's just tearing up the Pac-12. So it could be another long day for the defense as well.
Yeah, I feel like every game we go into, we say, boy, it's a bad matchup for Oregon's defense. Last week we said that about Christian McCaffrey, and he ends up going 61 yards right away, finishing with 135. Joe Williams is insane. He's averaged, since coming out of retirement, just 4 games, he's averaging 216 rushing yards a game. And it's sort of like, going in. Oregon knew going in McCaffrey was going to get the ball. They couldn't stop him. It's the same thing this week. You just wonder, just which holes Joe's going to find, because it seems like everybody's been able to find him, even if Oregon brings everybody up. Brady Hoke mentioned today on that 61-yarder, there's one guy that doesn't get in a hole, and a good running back finds it. So you have a hard time imagining that Joe Williams is going to be stopped. Maybe you can get Troy Williams to not be as effective and slow down the pass game and load up, but it just looks almost kind of similar to Stanford. You got to stop the run because you don't expect them to pass much, but when they did that against Stanford, they didn't stop the run, and Stanford passed a bit.
You'd like to say, okay, well, let's win special teams. We have Wogan, we have Schneider, we have, our punter's doing well, but Utah's the best in the business at special teams, it seems like. So I don't see a lot of scenarios where Oregon's going to compete in this game. Do you see any chance of an upset here?
No, I mean, I could see there's a scenario, like you say, Utah's offense has been kind of hit and miss. If Williams is on, is he coming off a career high in touchdown passes, and they put up 40, 50 points last week against ASU. Yeah, I guess you go look at that Cal film and say, how'd they keep him down in the 20s? And if you can do that, Oregon might be able to stay with them. But yeah, it's just hard to imagine. I mean, Oregon's defense hasn't given up less than 35, I don't think, in a Pac-12 game, 40 in a game that they've won. So it's just hard to imagine right now them keeping a team below 40, and I just don't see this offense against Utah being able to win a shootout.
I guess if there's one silver lining for all the fans out there complaining about late night starts, when you're bad, you play at 11 a.m. on the Pac-12 networks. That's what Oregon's going to do on Saturday at Utah, and we'll have plenty of time to wrap it up after that, so come back and visit us. Thanks for tuning in.